On this episode, two medical mysteries that defied the experts.
I would hold her and her head would kind of flop to the side.
We just knew something was terribly wrong.
We were worried for her.
When Peyton Rule is born with crippling symptoms no doctor can explain, her parents are forced to face a heartbreaking reality.
I had this fear that she's going to have a lifelong problem with this and possibly one day not be able to walk at all.
We were, most importantly, very concerned for our daughter.
Then, when a horrifying lesion engulfs Travis Walker's hand, his wife Jenna embarks on a desperate mission to save his life.
The abscess was so bad, there was fluid oozing out of his finger.
It's overwhelming, I just start crying.
I felt like we were running out of time. All I could do was pray.
In the fall of 1996, 18-year-old Amanda Scott was just beginning her second year of college. And more than anything, she was looking forward to working with children once she graduated.
I was studying early childhood education, and my plan was to go into teaching right away after graduation.
Little did Amanda realize that her entire world was about to change when she met Jason Rule.
The first time I saw Amanda was actually on my floor at St. Louis University in college. She popped out of the elevator. I instantly noticed her because she was beautiful.
I would say it was love at first sight. I felt an instant connection with him. We went on our first date and we were together all the time.
It just took off from there. There was nobody else I wanted to date.
A few months into the relationship, we just knew it was a soulmate situation, and so we knew that we were going to be together and that was going to be our future.
We were inseparable going forward from that point on.
The next 2 years seemed to fly by for the young couple. But just as Amanda is starting her junior year, she receives some unexpected news.
I found out I was pregnant in March of 1998. I was 19 years old. This was the biggest surprise of my life. I hadn't planned on that.
I was scared because we were a young couple. We both had a couple semesters of school to go before we were done. Neither one of us had jobs lined up yet.
We didn't know where we were going to live, and so we were frightened by the prospect of having a baby at this young age.
It added some stress to the relationship because there were new worries we had to think about, but I think strengthened our relationship through the uncertainty and stress and hard times that the pregnancy caused.
But they're determined to give their child a good life. And when Amanda goes into labor on a cool evening in October of 1998, they race to the hospital, anxious to meet their little girl.
I will never forget the day that my baby was born. It was a very long day, very exciting. She weighed 7 pounds, 4 ounces, and she was completely healthy. We decided to name her Peyton.
Holding Peyton for the first time was nothing I'd ever experienced before. To see your own flesh and blood, little fingers, little toes, it's just an experience you can't describe.
Standing there as a family, the three of us, it was an amazing feeling. We could not imagine our life without her.
The first couple months with Peyton were difficult. We were trying to finish school, both of us, try to find jobs, and also trying to learn how to take care of a new baby. But as far as her health goes, she seemed to be a normal kid, progressing just fine.
It was around 2 months of age that I noticed Peyton was just really kind of weak. I would hold her and her head would kind of flop to the side. Because of my background in early childhood education, I knew quite a bit about development, and I knew at the age babies should be lifting their head and have more neck strength than she had.
Alarmed, Amanda and Jason make an appointment with their doctor.
But the pediatrician dismissed it right away, saying, oh, she's just a floppy baby, she will catch up.
He diagnosed Peyton with hypotonia.
Hypotonia is more commonly known as low muscle tone. While it can be a sign of a more serious disorder, many children have no other health problems.
The doctor did not prescribe anything for Peyton, just said, give it time. We felt like maybe we're over-worrying here, So let's give it some more time and see if Peyton catches up.
Sure enough, 2 months later, Peyton begins to make some progress.
When I saw her lift her head, Peyton was 4 months old.
Relieved that their little girl is finally catching up to most infants her age, Amanda and Jason breathe a sigh of relief. But just 2 months later, they begin to wonder if their joy is premature. At 6 months old, Peyton still can't sit up.
Our concerns started escalating, but we'd been back to the pediatrician a couple times, and he said, it's still normal. Every child is at a different pace, still nothing to worry about. But she wasn't catching up to her peers. She seemed to be falling further behind them. We felt like something wasn't quite right.
Still, Amanda and Jason do the best they can to remain calm and trust the doctor's advice. During that summer, Jason graduates and lands a job as an accountant.
It was hard working all those hours with a new baby at home. I wanted to be there for her. I felt like I was missing certain things.
Going to school while raising Peyton was difficult. I knew I had a long, long day. I would have Peyton and I would have homework that I would need to catch up with. So the evening was very busy, and then I'd have to get up and do the same thing the next day.
A few months later, Amanda finally gets her degree.
I graduated in December of 1999. Peyton was about 14 months old at that time.
Amanda had always had dreams of teaching, but at that point in our lives, Peyton came first. We decided that it would be best that she stayed home with Peyton for the next couple years.
While Peyton is able to sit on her own, she's struggling to hold herself up. Unlike toddlers who are constantly on the go, Peyton doesn't seem to have the strength to move on her own.
When I put Peyton on her stomach, she would basically just lay there, and she would cry from morning till night.
Peyton always required a lot of attention at home. Because she lacked strength, she always needed help getting around. We always had to be right there for her when she was sitting somewhere because she could fall over real easily.
The doctor suggested that Peyton start physical therapy at this time. And we did physical therapy.
But we just weren't seeing the progression we needed to see.
By 14 or 15 months old, Peyton was still not walking. She was trying to stand up on her own, but at that age, if you looked at other children, they were already walking, and some were running at that point. I had this fear that I was going to be carrying her or really helping her into kindergarten. And I just wanted her to be able to run and play like the other kids and not to feel different. And I just knew that was going to be hard for her and that maybe her whole life was going to be hard.
When Peyton first tried to stand up, she was very, very wobbly. Amanda and I felt helpless watching Peyton try to do certain things.
Worried about their daughter, Amanda and Jason check back in with their pediatrician, but he assures them that Peyton is just a late bloomer.
We kept thinking she was going to take her first steps and start walking, but this went on for quite a long time and she just kept falling. We kept watching and watching for her to develop and get stronger, and it just wasn't happening.
But finally, in August of 2000, the day they're waiting for arrives.
Peyton was around 22 months old when she finally took her first steps. I'll never forget that day. We were very overjoyed.
She took about 3 steps across the room from one of us to the other. She was very wobbly. Her gait was very wide, but you could see the smile on her face as she was able to do it. It was a big day. I felt like this was another milestone where she'd start catching up with other kids.
It's a momentous occasion for Jason and Amanda as they watch their daughter take her first steps, and it inspires them to make their relationship official.
We were married in December of 2000. At that time, Peyton was 2 years old.
The day of the wedding was a beautiful day. We were surrounded by family and friends. Peyton was the flower girl, and she was able to walk down the aisle. She was unsteady, but it was kind of a short trip, and she made it without any falls, luckily.
I remember standing up there thinking, please don't fall, Peyton, please don't fall, and she made it. Amanda was beautiful, Peyton was beautiful. It was a special day.
It was just a great thing to finally be committed to each other through marriage.
The young couple is happier than ever. But just a few weeks later, while Amanda is playing with Peyton, a terrifying new symptom suddenly sets in.
She was reaching for a stuffed animal, and her hand just had a slight tremor to it. Like she just didn't have the strength. My gut feeling at this moment was that there could be something more wrong with her.
So Amanda called the pediatrician to tell him about Peyton's hand tremors, and his response back was, once again, it's no big deal. It's part of this low muscle tone. Nothing to worry about.
This was very frustrating for us. And that's when we decided we really, really needed to get another opinion.
Unfortunately, his diagnosis was the exact same. He said, don't worry, she's got low muscle tone, she'll catch up.
When the second doctor said the same thing that the first doctor said, we were so frustrated. We were trying to figure out what was happening with our daughter, and no one was giving us an answer. Peyton was past 3, and she was still very, very unsteady with how she walked. She would fall often. That was heartbreaking to think that this could be happening to her all the time.
Over the next few years, Jason and Amanda relentlessly take Peyton to one specialist after another. But they all dismiss the bizarre hand tremors and Peyton's lack of coordination as low muscle tone.
I was in preschool, and we would do a lot of climbing, and all my friends were like, oh, come on, Peyton, and I was like, no, I can't do that for some reason. I'm not really sure why.
I could tell Peyton was frustrated by not being able to walk. She just kept going, but I could tell that there was some frustration in her.
As a father, I felt helpless. I felt like we weren't getting what Peyton needed for her at that time.
No one was listening to what we were trying to tell them. We were worried for her.
Three-year-old Peyton Rule has never been able to take more than 5 steps without collapsing onto the floor. Even more frightening, her hands shake anytime she tries to hold something. Every doctor Peyton has seen is confident that she simply has low muscle tone and in time will begin to gain strength. But her parents, Jason and Amanda, aren't buying it.
Emotionally at this point, Amanda and I were drained. We spent the last 3 years trying to figure out what was causing our daughter's symptoms. We thought that someone out there has to be able to help us with this.
Desperate for answers, Amanda combs the internet and finds Dr. Ann Connolly, who specializes in children with motor skills problems.
My first impression of Dr. Connolly was she was very good with Peyton and seemed to take a genuine interest in Peyton and figuring out what was wrong with her.
She was having difficulty walking, and they thought that it may have a neurologic basis. On her examination, the most obvious thing was that most of her weakness was in her hands and her feet.
I love Dr. Connolly. I think she's great. She's very cool for a doctor.
Dr. Connolly runs a battery of tests to see how well Peyton's nerves are communicating with her muscles, and quickly reaches a conclusion.
When Peyton's nerve conduction results came back that there were some abnormalities in her nerves, we finally felt we were getting some answers to what was going on with her.
Our best diagnosis was that this was CIDP.
CIDP, or chronic inflammatory demyelinating polyneuropathy, is a rare neurological disorder in which the immune system attacks the nerves, causing muscle weakness, especially in the arms and legs. Luckily, it can be treated.
Most people are pretty happy when I diagnose them with CIDP because it has a really good chance of being treated. Most children respond to one of the medicines. Even if they're not completely cured, they're made markedly better.
I remember the day they told us Peyton had CIDP and that they could treat it. It was a very, very happy day for Amanda and I. We felt like finally we found out what's wrong with our daughter, and even better, we can fix this.
Jason and I embraced, and it was it was a very happy moment for us because after all these years, we had such a hard time figuring out what's going on, and finally someone gave us an answer, and it was a great answer. No longer did we have to look into her future and see that she was going to have so many troubles.
Dr. Connolly immediately starts Peyton on an intense 6-month course of the treatment, which will allow her damaged nerves to heal.
2 times a month, Peyton would go to the local hospital and be hooked up to an IV for 8 or 9 hours.
The treatments themselves were very tough on Peyton. She has a very big aversion to needles, and they'd have to stick her every time. And so she was always very scared going over there.
As a little kid, I hated needles. I did not like them at all. I always felt really confused why they kept sticking me every time I went to the hospital.
We would go back to Dr. Connolly periodically to do muscle tests on Peyton to see how her progression was.
If she had CIDP, I would have liked to have seen a change even by 1 or 2 months. But virtually every child who's going to respond would have responded by 6 months, and Peyton did not.
Dr. Connolly was surprised. She indicated that the treatments weren't working, and she determined that Peyton, in fact, did not have CIDP.
We were heartbroken. We just really thought that this was the answer for her, and it was hard to accept that possibly this wasn't. We felt very let down at this point.
We were very sad, very frustrated, and most importantly, very concerned for our daughter. We thought we had this fixed, and now we have no idea what's wrong with our daughter.
Determined to get to the bottom of their little girl's case, Dr. Connolly begins to review her file once again. And soon she has a new theory. Peyton may be suffering from some type of genetic disease.
We decided to test Peyton's blood for abnormalities in 6 different genes.
So we waited, and finally the blood test results came back, and Dr. Connolly knew right away what the results meant.
When the blood test came back, we knew that Peyton had CMT, or Charcot-Marie tooth disease.
Charcot-Marie tooth disease is a genetic condition that affects the nerves. In a healthy individual, nerves are surrounded by a substance called myelin, which helps transmit vital information to the body, including the muscles. But in patients like Peyton, for some unknown reason, the myelin does not form properly, and the nerves get damaged. Essentially, they are unable to send proper signals to the muscles. As a result, patients lose control of their movements.
CMT is a disorder of nerve. There are many forms. Nerves are like telephone wires that go all the way out to your fingers and all the way out to your toes. And it tends to affect the nerves furthest away first. So the way CMT affects people is that it causes weakness first in your feet and in your ankles, and with time it can affect muscles up closer to your body. Right now we have no cure for CMT.
I think we were in shock. It was very hard for us to realize that here we go from Peyton being treated and the problem just going away to she's going to have a lifelong problem with this.
When my parents told me that I had CMT, it was definitely confusing and kind of like, what? What are you talking about?
Dr. Connolly goes on to explain that all of Peyton's symptoms are directly related to the condition, from her difficulties walking to the hand tremors she often experiences.
Her symptoms from the time that she was born started to all kind of come together for us.
Her wobbly walk, her balance trouble, it all made perfect sense.
Unfortunately, the disease is usually progressive. As her nerves become more damaged, Peyton will increasingly lose control over her body.
She may ultimately lose the ability to walk. Doesn't mean that yet, but it may mean that one day.
We could not believe that that was going to happen to our little girl. Peyton does understand some of what could happen. I think she doesn't believe that she may be in a wheelchair one day. We try not to focus on that. We try not to say that that's going to happen. She knows it's progressive, and so she knows that it could be part of her disease.
When I asked why things were happening to me, my parents said, your body doesn't work the way that some other people does. I was frustrated because I don't want to be treated differently than other people.
Jason and Amanda Rule have just learned that their only daughter, Peyton, is suffering from a condition that will most likely cripple her for life. The 4-year-old has Charcot-Marie tooth disease, a rare neurological disorder that damages her nerves and could ultimately leave her paralyzed.
It was a loss of hope for us, knowing that there's no cure for CMT and that her path is unknown and that it could get worse.
When we were told she's going to have a lifelong problem with this and possibly one day not be able to walk at all, it was very, very sad.
As the worried parents do the best they can to face the grim reality, Dr. Ann Connolly assures them that she can help Peyton live a relatively normal life.
Dr. Connolly prescribes physical therapy for Peyton, and Peyton will continue that treatment for the rest of her life.
There are no specific medications, but one of the types of physical activity that's very good for people who have weakness is swimming. We recommended that she be active in water. It just helps the joints and it helps the muscles also.
Exactly what course the disease will take over time is uncertain. Experts don't know much about the extremely rare form of CMT which Peyton is living with.
I have never worked with a child with this form until Peyton was diagnosed.
Our understanding is that there may be one other person with that particular type, but she is the youngest with that particular type. So the doctors say she has her own disease and she'll kind of show what happens down the line.
Although the rules are relieved to finally have some answers, they can't help but wonder why so many doctors missed the diagnosis.
Her genetic cause for her disease had only been discovered about 1 year before she was diagnosed. So the science for CMT is very new, and it was simply not possible when Peyton was an infant to make that specific diagnosis.
Today, Peyton is a happy, active 6th grader with a courageous spirit.
I don't really think about it all day. I'm pretty independent. I like to do everything on my own. If I'm faced with an obstacle, I'll be like, maybe I shouldn't do this because of my CMT.
Well, Peyton is just a little athlete. She loves basketball and karate. She is an amazing swimmer. She can hold her breath like a champ. Peyton is an inspiration to not only me, but everybody that meets her. She's so determined. She looks at every situation and she's so positive about everything. And she's such an amazing kid. I am so proud that Peyton is my daughter. I can't not imagine having any other child. We're so lucky to be her parents.
As a father, you think you'll teach your kids a lot of stuff, and she's actually taught me a lot of stuff about determination, perseverance. She's accomplished so much, and she's 12 years old. My hope for Peyton's future is that someday there'll be a cure for CMT, but if not, that she keeps her determination, her perseverance, her great attitude, and stays the same person she is today.
I don't really know exactly what lays in the future, but it's going to be really cool, big, I hope, I have big plans for the future. I have CMT, but I'm not going to let that keep me from doing stuff or hold me back. I'm just going to go out and live my life.
Next, Travis Walker faces a horrifying illness that threatens to take his life. In the spring of 2002, 32-year-old Travis Walker was living in the small town of Neosho, Missouri. Recently divorced, he'd adapted well to bachelorhood and spent his free time hanging out with his friends or reveling in his hobby.
One of my hobbies is to take care of my fish. I really enjoy taking care of them. I have a 55-gallon fish tank. I've had goldfish, bala sharks, and some cichlids. And I'm physically active. I work for a major soft drink distributor. I set up and tear down displays. I fill the shelves and the coolers, and it's a very physical job. That's the one part about the job I really do like.
On average, Travis works 50 hours a week. And the last thing he expects to have time for is romance.
Some mutual friends of ours introduced us, set us up on a blind date, and there was an instant attraction, an instant spark.
Jenna made me laugh, which is not something I was used to with any other woman that I've ever met. But what I love most about Jenna is pretty much what I still do. She's funny, she's very smart, and I just feel real comfortable with her in every way.
Travis is also totally taken in by her compassion. Jenna is a nurse at the local hospital.
I've always wanted to help people. I love interacting with my patients and taking care of them and getting to know them. And if I can help alleviate their fear, that's a real win for me.
Over the next 2 years, the couple is almost inseparable. and soon they make a momentous decision. They're ready to tie the knot.
We decided to go to Las Vegas to get married because that's where his best friend lived, and we wanted everybody to be a part of it. So my mom and dad and sister and best friend, and we all flew to Vegas and got married in Vegas.
The years after the wedding couldn't be happier or healthier for the Walkers. But during the summer of 2009, Travis suddenly develops an odd bump on his left index finger.
I didn't really give it much thought. It was just a little bitty white dot, looked like a little pimple on there.
Nicks and cuts are very common for Travis at his job, so I thought that he had just cut himself and gotten an infection.
But to their surprise, the strange swollen gash seems to get bigger over the next 2 weeks.
It went from a little spot on my knuckle to really the size of my knuckle.
I decided then to make an appointment with Travis's family doctor.
She just looked at it and decided that it was an infection. She didn't seem worried at all.
The doctor prescribed for Travis an antibiotic. The doctor thought that it would be about a week before the bump would go down.
It actually got worse. After a few weeks, it went from like a small yellow pimple to a big red bump. At this point, the bump was just a little bit bigger than maybe a nickel.
I was actually surprised that something that started out so simple had turned into something so big.
At that point, it was actually getting to where it was difficult to move my finger. I was thinking, I'm on all this medication, then why am I not getting any better?
Alarmed by the strange development, Travis heads back in to see his doctor, who orders a round of blood work and an x-ray of his hand.
She wasn't really sure what was wrong with him. She felt a rheumatologist might be able to help. The rheumatologist looked at Travis, reviewed his lab work, looked at his x-rays, and diagnosed Travis with rheumatoid arthritis.
Rheumatoid arthritis is an incurable disease in which the immune system attacks the joints, causing swelling, disfiguration, and difficulty performing daily activities.
We were both devastated with that diagnosis.
It was going to mean constant treatment because there's no cure for it. I was getting worried about how this was going to affect my work.
To see someone as active and vibrant as Travis with this disease was saddening. It's not fair.
"3 months ago, Travis Walker developed a small bump on his left index finger. But now it's almost 4 inches wide, and his doctor is confident that he has rheumatoid arthritis, an incurable and crippling condition.
The rheumatologist started Travis on steroids designed to keep the rheumatoid arthritis symptoms at bay for as long as possible.
But the steroids don't help at all. In fact, over the next 3 weeks, the mysterious lesion only gets worse.
The swelling and the pain actually spread from my finger to my pinky and all the way back to my wrist. At one point, I couldn't move my wrist at all. My fingers were very swollen. The skin was actually peeling, and it was unbearable.
That's when I knew that something was really wrong. This wasn't adding up. Travis wasn't getting better.
When the Walkers check in with the doctor, he encourages them to give the medicine some time to kick in. And Travis does the best he can to cope with the excruciating pain. But it's becoming harder and harder to do his job.
I was losing mobility by the day, and it was more pain than I ever experienced.
Travis had to take a medical leave from work. There was no possible way that he could perform his job with one hand. At home, Travis was much more reliant on me to help him with his daily activities because with one hand, even something as simple as taking a shower became cumbersome. I couldn't believe how much worse things had gotten. After 4 weeks of no improvement, we went back to the rheumatologist and we got an MRI of Travis's hand.
Just really the entire situation, it just wore me out, just overwhelmed me, I just start crying.
The rheumatologist saw on Travis's MRI an abscess, which is a collection of pus from an infection.
Concerned that the infection will spread, the rheumatologist recommends immediate surgery to drain the abscess. And Jenna contacts Dr. Rex Peterson, an orthopedic surgeon at the hospital where she works.
Jenna called me about Travis, and we got him in the office the same day. When I first saw Travis, he had a very tender left hand. I didn't believe that Travis had rheumatoid arthritis. He really didn't have a lot of the symptoms that I would have laid on rheumatoid arthritis.
The abscess was so bad, there was fluid oozing out of his finger. Dr. Peterson looked at Travis's hand and decided we needed to do surgery right now.
Abscesses get worse and worse, and they can get to where the patient becomes toxic, and sometimes they can be life-threatening.
He laid me down on his table, started cutting my hand open, and I definitely wasn't looking at it. I could feel the knife going through it, and I could hear it also.
Once the engorged abscess is drained, Dr. Peterson sends out blood samples to determine what kind of infection they're dealing with. And while they wait for the results at home, Jenna keeps a close eye on the open wound.
And once we got it drained out and packed, it still hurt, just about the same as it did when I walked in. I didn't want to even look at my hand.
Finally, a few days later, the findings are in, and they're all negative for any type of infection, which leaves only one horrifying possibility.
Sometimes cancers present like infection, so it's something that we needed to consider.
That's when the tears started, and I chose not to tell Travis at this point. It was really hard because I felt like this could potentially end Travis's life.
Over the last 3 months, a small bump on Travis Walker's finger has transformed into a horrifying red abscess that's engulfed his entire left hand. His doctor is confident that it's not an infection and now suspects that he may have cancer.
Travis was looking to me to be strong. When Dr. Peterson told me that this may be cancer, I was so overcome by fear and emotion.
That afternoon, Travis undergoes a biopsy to confirm the doctor's hunch.
Dr. Peterson told me that it may take 7 days to get the pathology back. Those 7 days felt like 7 years.
The culture results came back, and they were all negative.
I was so relieved that Travis didn't have cancer, but it still gave us no answer. And still not knowing what was wrong with Travis at this point was just overwhelming.
Determined to get to the bottom of Travis's case, Dr. Peterson begins searching for a new theory and continues to treat the harrowing lesion.
Every day, Dr. Peterson would remove the packing, he would irrigate where the abscess had been, and he would repack it so that it would continue to drain.
But no matter what he does, the wound is spreading up Travis's arm. Even more alarming, he's starting to lose his skin.
There were new areas coming up that were forming abscesses. So that became very alarming to me.
And just when they think it can't get any worse, Travis takes a terrifying turn.
I went to work, and when I came home, I found Travis in bed, and he was very lethargic and tired. He looked dehydrated, his lips were cracked.
And then she started taking my temperature and my vital signs, and I could see that she was worried.
I found that he had a temperature at that point, and his heart rate was very fast, and his blood pressure was low. I knew that something was really seriously wrong. I immediately put him in the car. I was scared to death.
I was just really weak and just feeling really nauseous and really nervous.
When we first came into the hospital, we were immediately taken back to the ICU. They confirmed that he was septic.
Septic shock is an often fatal condition in which a massive infection causes total organ failure.
We immediately began IV fluids to help Travis's body compensate.
At this point, my memory started having a lot of blank spots.
With sepsis, the person's systems began to shut down. Travis was fading in and out of consciousness. His heart was beating extremely fast. His blood pressure was low. He was confused, delirious, and he had a fever of 103.
All I could do was pray. I was fearful that Travis would die.
Over the past 6 months, a bizarre, excruciating infection has spread from Travis Walker's hand all the way up his arm, and no doctor seems to know what's going on. Now, he's in the hospital, and the medical team believes he's going into septic shock, which can be fatal. In a race against time, doctors are doing everything they can to stabilize him.
Travis started slipping in and out of consciousness. I don't really know how to explain how I felt. I was just so scared, I didn't know what to do.
At this point, I was really, on so much pain medication that it really probably kept me from really thinking about what was really going on.
It's touch and go, but after several hours of tense waiting, Travis finally begins to respond to the medication.
Thank God they were able to stabilize Travis's vital signs, but we had no definitive diagnosis. Travis had been in the ICU for a few days when Dr. Peterson took me out into the hallway. I remember asking him, "Is Travis gonna live?" And he said, "I think I can save his life, but I'm not sure I can save his arm." It was like getting kicked in the stomach. I couldn't breathe when he first said it. My immediate reaction was, oh my goodness, what am I gonna do? I couldn't even tell Travis that he might lose his arm.
Jenna was shocked when I made that expression to her, and she became very tearful and pleaded with me not to cut his arm off. Had some hesitancy, and with Jenna's pleading, I decided not to amputate his arm and that we would go ahead and continue to treat the abscesses one at a time as they progressed. When it comes down to my level of commitment to my patients, it's a personal thing. I try to treat my patients like I would my family.
But it's a risky decision. The mysterious infection could turn toxic at any moment. Desperate for answers, Dr. Peterson digs even deeper into his medical journals.
I felt like we were running out of time. Travis might not make it if we couldn't find out what was causing it, what his diagnosis was.
Almost 5 days later, Dr. Peterson comes across a case that seems to fit Travis's to a T. He begins to grill Jenna about their lives, and something she says gives him the clue he needs. But it's imperative that Travis undergo one final test to confirm his hunch. An hour later, the results are in.
Dr. Peterson came into the ICU room, and I could tell by the look on his face he had an answer.
We decided to go ahead and move forward with the Mycobacterium Marinum as our presumptive diagnosis.
Mycobacterium Marinum is a very rare bacteria that normally lives in oceans, lakes, and rivers. In a healthy individual, the skin protects the body from harmful bacteria that can invade it. But in Travis's case, a small puncture wound on his knuckle allowed the bacteria to enter his system and become a raging infection.
When we look back on the history, he punctured his finger at work, got a little sliver or something into his finger, and then he went home and cleaned out his fish tank, which were tropical fish who have this bacteria on them.
I never thought that I could possibly get an incredibly terrible disease from my home fish tank.
The bacteria gets in the body, and it forms a little red bump, and the body's mechanism of defense is to cause the inflammation. The abscesses then are the body's pumping in a lot of white blood cells, killing a lot of bacteria. The bacteria die, and that's what makes the pus. And eventually, it goes up into your blood system, and then you become septic, and the person gets very sick and eventually overwhelms the system enough to where it kills the patient.
If they hadn't made a correct diagnosis, Travis at very minimum would have lost his arm, if not his life.
With no time to spare, Travis is placed on a powerful antibiotic that specifically targets Mycobacterium Marinum. And amazingly, within just a few hours, Dr. Peterson notices an improvement.
I was incredibly relieved that Travis's condition was curable. It's hard to think that a healthy 39-year-old man could be on the brink of death because of a small puncture wound on your hand and a fish tank. But I thank God every day that it didn't take his life or his arm.
You know, when I look at the pictures, I'm just glad and thankful that it's over. Just thankful that it's done and I'm going to be okay.
I think it became something special for me to be able to see Travis progress and to see him get better. And you always feel good when you see that happen. He's a great guy. You can't help but like him.
The doctor's prognosis was that I would be completely cured from Mycobacterium Marinum.
While the Walkers will be forever grateful to Dr. Peterson, they can't help but wonder why it took so long to land a solid diagnosis.
What happened to Travis was very rare. I had never treated a case of Mycobacterium marinum. In the United States, we see about 160 individuals infected by that bacterium per year.
Today, Travis has fully recovered from the infection and is living a happy and healthy life.
My hand is mostly mobile, but there are a couple of fingers that I can't bend all the way. But I'm very glad and thankful to be healthy again.
He still has an aquarium, but Travis now takes safety precautions when he's cleaning the tank.
Yes, I love taking care of my fish, but I don't put my hands in there without having gloves on.
I'm incredibly amazed that this spiral is so far out of control. It started out as a tiny little bump and ended up with Travis fighting for his life. You get these glimpses of what your life would be like without this person who is so important to you, that you love so much. And I literally couldn't face the idea of not having him there.
I'm so thankful for Jenna and Dr. Peterson's perseverance and that they didn't give up on me.